Adding and subtracting positive rational numbers. The objective is 5.3K. The student is expected to add and subtract positive rational numbers fluently. In 4th grade, this looked like students adding fractions with like denominators. In 5th grade, the students are expected to be able to add and subtract with fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. In the future, in 6th grade, they will be multiplying and dividing rational numbers fluently as well as adding and subtracting. The only new vocabulary word that we're going to be dealing with is rational number. This is a number that can be written as a fraction, so we will stress that these will involve fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. So before we can add and subtract fractions and decimals together, we have to make sure we can add and subtract decimals and change decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. So we're going to start off with decimals to fractions. So here, the first step is going to be to underline the last decimal place. Well, the last decimal place is the 5. I'm going to use a strategy, and my favorite strategy is the 1 and the zeros. This tells me that the 5 is in the hundredths place, so the decimal ends in the hundredths place, so I'm going to write it as 25 over 100. Now we simplify the fraction using the ladder. Here we're going to divide with only prime numbers, so I started off with 5 because they are both divisible by 5, which gave me 5 and 20, or 5/20ths, and then I'll continue to divide by 5, which gives me 1/4. So I know that 25 hundredths represents 1/4. Alright, so partners, I want you to look at each other. The partner on the left side of the room is going to talk first. I want you to explain how to change a decimal to a fraction, and then your partner is going to repeat what you said, and they'll add or change anything that they disagree with. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do so. Alright, so I'm going to look for a popsicle stick. Alright, number 3, can you repeat to me how do we change a decimal to a fraction in complete sentences? Alright, thank you. So basically you just repeated what you saw me do on the board and what the steps say. So now let's do some practice. I'm going to do the first one as a think aloud, so I want you to just watch me and pay attention. You do not have to write anything down. So here I have 75, and let's see what place that 5 is in. The hundredths. So I have 75 hundredths. So I would rewrite that as 75 over 100. But now I need to simplify to change it into its simplified form. Here's my ladder, and here's 75 and 100. I know that they are both divisible by 5, which would give me 75 divided by 5 is 15, 100 divided by 5 is 20. And I can keep going. They're still both divisible by 5. 15 divided by 5 is 3, 20 divided by 5 is 4. So I know that 75 hundredths is equivalent to 3/4. Now for question number 2. I have 2 and 15 hundredths. I want you to think to yourself first, how am I going to solve this problem? I'm going to give you about 20 seconds to do so, and then you're going to share with your partner. Alright, go ahead, and partner that talked second last time, you're going to go ahead and talk first and explain how you're going to change this decimal into a fraction. The first partner, you can agree or disagree and tell them what you would do differently or if you would do it the same. Alright, if your desk is divisible by 7, please stand. Alright, how about Corey? Can you please tell me how I would change 15 hundredths into a decimal? Into a fraction. So you wrote as 15 over 100, and you simplified. What'd you get when you simplified? 3/20ths. Good job. So what do we do with the 2 as the whole number? You told me we only change the decimal part of this number into a fraction, but what do I need to do with the whole number? Number 17. Ashley. Perfect. We still need to put the 2 before it, and then we have the 3/20ths next to it. Good job. For number 3, I would do the exact same thing. I would have them get together as partners and solve this one as well. Now let's practice changing fractions to decimal. Here we're going to divide the numerator by the denominator. We call this TIBO, which stands for top in, bottom out. So here we take our numerator, which is our 3. It's going to go inside our house. And then we have our 8, which is our denominator, and it's going to go outside. So we have our dividend and our divisor, and we're just going to simply divide. Remember to add your decimal and your zeros. And here we have that 3/8 is going to give us 375 thousandths. Alright, so we're going to look at this part again. Partner 2, you're going to go ahead and tell partner 1 how you would change a fraction to a decimal, and then partner 1 is going to repeat what you said or change anything that they disagree with. I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to do so. Alright, if your desk is divisible by 2, please stand. If you are also divisible by 5, stay standing. Alright, number 10, how would I change a fraction to a decimal? You simply divide top in, bottom out. Good job. Alright, so let me do one question as a think aloud for you. So you're just going to watch as I solve this problem. Here I have 1/8, and I need to change it to a decimal, so I'm going to use TIBO, top in, bottom out. So my top number, which is my 1, is going to go inside the house, and the 8 is going to go on the outside. So I need to add my decimal and a 0. How many times can 8 go into 10? Well, it can go in 1 time, but I still have 2 left over, so I need to add another 0 and bring it down. 8 can go into 22 times, which is 16. I have 4 left over, so I need to add another 0 and bring it down. 40 divided by 8 is 5, so I know that 1/8 is equivalent to 125 thousandths. So now for number 2. I want you and your partner to think about it first. How would you solve this problem? And then you can work together to change your fraction to a decimal. So for the first 10 seconds, we're just thinking. And now you may share with your neighbor and actually go ahead and solve it on your paper as well. If you are a prime number, if you'll please stand for me. Alright, number 11. Jill, thank you. Will you please tell me how you changed 1 3/5 into a decimal? Okay, I agree. We're going to keep the 1 as a whole number, so you just changed the 3/5. You did top in, bottom out, added your decimal and a 0, and you told me it went in there 6 times, which gave you 6/10. I agree. So then for questions 3 and 4, I would do the same thing and have them work through those with their partner, and then we would share as a class. Alright, For this one, we're adding and subtracting with a fraction and a decimal. So we've already added with fractions with unlike denominators. We've already added with decimals in the past. So we're just going to practice combining the two. So this one I'm going to do for you, so you're just listening, and you're going to see me solve it as fractions and as decimals. I'm going to do it both ways so you have an example of both. So here I have 4 1/2 plus 2 75/100. I would prefer to change it to a decimal and solve with just decimals first. So in order to change my fraction to a decimal, I know that I have to divide because this fraction bar always means that I can divide. So top in, bottom out, add a decimal and a 0, and go in 5 times. So I know that this is also 4 5/10. So here I have 4 5/10 plus 2 75/100. So when I'm adding decimals, I know I have to stack my numbers and line up my decimal places. Go ahead and add. And I'm going to end up with 7 25/100. Alright, so I changed it to where I solved with just decimals. Now I want to change this decimal into a fraction and solve it that way as well. So in order to change my decimal to a fraction, I'm going to underline my last place, use my strategy. I know that this says 75/100. Alright, so again, I can put 75 and 100 into the ladder. We've already done this, and some of you may remember that quarters, if we have 3 quarters, it's 75 cents out of 100 cents. If not, you just always simplify to make sure you get the correct answer. So I have that this is 2 3/4, and this one is still just the 4 1/2. So now I want to solve this as fractions. So I like to use my 4 squares. So here I'm going to write my problem. So 4 1/2 plus 2 3/4. I have unlike denominators, so I need to find my LCD by putting my two denominators in the ladder. I'm going to divide by 2 because they're both divisible by 2, and I end up with 1 and 2. I'm going to make my puffy L and solve for my LCD, which is going to be 4. Now that I have what my least common denominator is, I'm going to make my equivalent fractions. So I have 4 1/2 and 2 3/4. Both denominators need to be changed to fourths. 2 times what gives me 4? That would be 2. What I do to my denominator, I'm also going to do to my numerator. And I now have 2/4. Here I already have a 4, so it's the same thing as multiplying by 1 or just keeping it as 3/4. When I add these up, I can't forget about my whole numbers. So here I have 6 for my whole number, and then I also have 5/4. Well, that looks funny. I have an improper fraction, so I have to change my improper fraction into a mixed number, but yet remember to combine it with my whole number I have already. So in order to do this, I'm going to have to divide. Top in, bottom out. 5 divided by 4 can go in 1 time, which will leave me with 1/4 remaining. But I can't forget about my 6. So I actually have 7 1/4. So I can check, is 7 1/4 equivalent to 7 25/100? And I would say that 1 out of 4 quarters is 25 cents, so I would agree with that answer. Is there another way that I could have done this without showing so much work? I want you to talk to your partner and see if there's something else I could have done without showing as much work as I just did. Alright, so if you are at table 1 or 3, if you'll stand. If you're wearing black, you may sit down. Alright, Rachel, what could I have done differently? Do y'all agree with her? Good. I could have solved for just one, changed either to fractions or to decimals, and then just changed my answer, converted it to a fraction or decimal, instead of actually showing all of the work. But here I actually wanted to show you how I do that. So now let's take a few minutes and do some practice problems together. So I would give the students about 5 minutes or so to answer these two questions where they're changing decimals to fractions and fractions to decimals. I expect them to be able to work together to complete this, and then we're going to stand and share our thought process and our answers. Make sure you use some type of randomization strategy to call on people to share their answers. Alright, for the next part, we would look at some questions where we're using just decimals and whole numbers to solve. And since we've already done that in the past, I'm not going to go over that one with you with the class I normally would. And then we would also do one with just fractions with unlike denominators. And then last but not least, we would do a word problem with a fraction and a decimal. And I'm actually going to solve this one with the class for an example. Alright, so here I have Tina, who spent 3/5 of her paycheck on a trip to the beach. She spent 375 thousandths of her paycheck on new clothes for the trip. What fraction of her paycheck did Tina spend on the trip and clothes together? Alright, we're going to call on people's numbers to give me the important information that I need to underline. But before we do that, I want you to go ahead and reread this question to yourself and be thinking about what is the important information and how am I going to solve this. So I'm going to give you about 15 seconds to reread and think that through. Alright, so what is my important information? Number 7, Jeremy. So she spent 3/5 of her paycheck on the trip to the beach. Alyssa. She spent 375 thousandths of her paycheck on new clothes. Number 14. What fraction? So you told me to box in fraction. That's pretty important. So I know that my answer needs to be a fraction and not a decimal. And then what fraction did she spend on the trip and clothes together? Good. So now what am I going to do? What is my plan to solve this problem? Number 24. Alright, good. So you said that my answer needs to be a fraction, so I need to change my decimal to a fraction before we can do anything else. But then you also said that we're going to be adding because it says together. How much did she spend on everything together? Good. So let's just go ahead and change this decimal to a fraction. How do I change my decimal to a fraction? Number 8. Thank you. I'm going to underline this last place. I'm going to rewrite it over here so we have some more room. You said to use a strategy to figure out what place that's in. You agree with thousandths. So 375 thousandths. And then what do we need to do? Simplify. Good job. Alright, so I know that I'm going to use what to divide with. What are they both divisible by? Number 3. 5. Okay. So on your paper, go ahead and solve this part with me. Go ahead and simplify this fraction. While they're simplifying, I would cover up my work to where they can't see it, but simplify at the same time or walk around and already have this done on the board. When they are done, I'll ask someone to share out. So what did we get when we when we simplified this fraction? Number 17. You got 3/8. Give me a thumbs up if y'all agree with 3/8 and a thumbs down if you disagree. Awesome. So we know that 375 thousandths is equivalent to 3/8. So a few minutes ago you told me that we were going to be adding. So again, we're going to use our 4 squares. And I have 3/8 now plus 3/5. But I have unlike denominators. So what do I need to do when I have unlike denominators? Number 21. Good, I need to find my LCD. So I'm going to put that in the ladder, just my denominators. Can I take anything out of this? Do they have any common factors? Are there anything that they're both divisible by? No, so what do I have to do? Multiply, good. So my LCD would be 40. So I need to do what next? Amber? Good, I need to make my equivalent fractions. So I know that both denominators need to become 40. What would I multiply 8 by? Yes. All right, 5. Good job. What I do to my divisor, and they normally repeat, I do to my numerator. So I now have 15/40ths. What do I have to multiply 5 by in order to get to 40? 8. What I do to my denominator, I do to my numerator, which is going to give me 24. All right, so now when I add this up, I end up with 39/40ths. So I need to ask myself, is there anything wrong with that fraction? Do I need to simplify it? Is it improper? It's good? Okay. So is it what my question is asking for? What fraction of her paycheck did Tina spend on the trip and clothes together? So I did combine them, turn them into fractions. My answer is a fraction. And then I need to ask myself if it's reasonable. So I can look at both of those numbers and kind of determine whether or not I think my answer is reasonable. Give me a thumbs up if you agree with reasonable and a thumbs down if you disagree. And then I would have someone explain why they agree or disagree. And then I would have our kids do partner practice where they are working on word problems that involve fractions, decimals, and whole numbers. And then before we leave, we have a ticket out. So solve the problem below on a sticky note and place on the correct color. So before they walk out, there is a red light, green light, yellow light. And the green means I got this and I'm ready to go on. Yellow, I need a little extra practice. And red, I do not understand this concept. So I'm looking for them to solve and then tell me how they think that they're doing with it. Hope this helps.